The U.S. Commission on Civil Rights is an independent, bipartisan, fact-finding federal agency informing the development of national civil rights policy. Post interviewed its chairman, Castro, about the agency's latest report on immigrant detention.
The Commission has had a long history of interest in immigration issues. Our first big report, the Tarnished Golden Door, came out in 1980. And one of the conclusions there was that immigrant and migrant communities, because of language and cultural issues, as well as legal misconceptions, are very prone to having civil rights violations imposed upon them. And that's a statement that holds true today. The Commission itself over the years, individually or through our state advisory committees, has periodically looked at the issue of immigration. We went out in 2012 to Alabama when these SB 1070 type of state enforcement laws were going on, and we held a hearing. We're actually going to turn that hearing into a report. We just issued the transcript initially because at the time the debate on immigration reform was starting, and we wanted to get that out as soon as possible. But we're going to put that report out at some point. But the point there being is that there has been a long-term interest in immigration, in particular the civil rights implications of that. I myself, since becoming chair, wanted to take a look at this issue, and the impetus for us to actually move forward with it began last summer when the number of refugee children, immigrant children, border children as they've been called, began to increase along with families that were coming over. And we began to hear reports from respected community and nonprofit and legal advocacy groups that there were abuses that were beginning to occur when these young people or these families were being taken into U.S. custody, and also concerns about due process rights. So with that in mind, I prepared what's called a concept paper, which is a 1, 2, 3 pager to my fellow commissioners, requesting that we take a look at this topic, that we conduct a hearing and investigate it. And it is usually done in process with 3 or 4 others that are being considered as well. But given the nature of the issue, at my request, we made this the statutory enforcement report, which of the 4 or 5 reports we may do a year is the primary report, the one behind which we put most of our resources and effort, because it is mandated by Congress that we do at least one a year that focuses on specific federal agencies to determine whether or not they're enforcing civil rights laws. So in this case, the agencies are Department of Homeland Security, ICE, and related entities, also the Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Refugees. My commissioners joined with me, and a majority of us, and said, yeah, this will be the topic that we look at as our 2015 statutory enforcement report. Lo and behold, the issue becomes one that has come to a head recently as well, with litigation going on. It's certainly part of the political debate at the moment. So it seems like the timing on this is absolutely the right time for us to issue our findings and recommendations, and hopefully have an impact on the decision making in this situation.
Right. And what were some of the findings you encountered?
Well, in essence, we found that there are detention facilities out there, some of which are run by the government, some of which are run by private prison corporations, that are not meeting the requirements, whether they're legal requirements or regulatory requirements that they are required to meet in terms of protection of rights of these detainees. There are issues of concern of violation of civil rights, right to counsel, right to access to medical care and food, and so a whole host of civil rights issues that presented themselves as concerns. We recommend that family detention be eliminated. In fact, that all detention be eliminated, but quickly and expeditiously family detention especially, and that those resources be reallocated to determine less restrictive alternative means of detention. And also to support programs where there's legal counsel for these individuals. A counter argument is always, well, if you let these folks go, they're going to disappear. How are you going to ensure they go to court? Well, studies show that when these, particularly the children, for example, are released and they have access to counsel or engagement with a community organization, 92% of them show up for their hearings. That's a pretty high percentage. We have to understand these folks are coming here to seek asylum. They're coming to be protected from a situation that in their homeland is untenable. they're not going to want to disappear. They're going to want to have their rights enforced. They're going to want to find their asylum case confirmed. So these are the people the least risky of all, and they should be released quickly.
Describe what you personally saw when you went to visit these centers.
What was very impactful for me, one is obviously chairman of the Civil Rights Commission as a presidential appointee to come, even though we're an independent federal agency. I highly value the fact that I was appointed by President Obama. And so to go and see these individuals, these moms in particular, and the kids, although we also went to Port Isabel, but the most impactful for me was to speak to these families and these children, to come to them as someone who looks like them, who speaks their language, who is not that far removed historically or familiarly from where they come from, to be able to say, I'm here as a federal agent, as a federal leader, and as someone who was appointed by the president to find out what your conditions are. And then to be able to speak to them in their language, in our language, and hear from them about the terrible situation they find themselves in. Moms who are on a hunger strike tell me that they were forced to quit the hunger strike because the DHS, ICE officials there at this private prison-run facility told them that if they didn't quit, their children would be taken away from them. As a parent, I was devastated to hear that. These moms are saying, our children, our toddlers learn to walk here behind these walls in detention. They don't have adequate access to counsel. They are having a hard time enforcing their rights. There are children there who are despondent and depressed. They told me about one child who attempted to kill himself, 11-year-old, because he just didn't want to be there anymore. So these are very difficult situations that these families find themselves in. And they're not killers, they're not cutthroats, they're not gangbangers, they're not terrorists. They're moms and kids fleeing those sorts of conditions in their homeland. They shouldn't be behind bars. This report, particularly coming from the Civil Rights Commission, which has historically been the nation's conscience and voice on civil rights issues, our predecessors contributed to the creation of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which celebrate 25 years of that this year. That voice is now a voice that's speaking on this topic and very clearly and very strongly saying that there are civil rights violations that exist here and that we as a nation must stop family detention in particular and detention generally. It is our hope that that helps resolve this issue and contributes positively to this conversation which our nation's having right now on this topic.